Again, I appreciate everyone coming to visit with me every morning at 7 a.m. I'm Dr. Paul, and we'll be going over the healthy mind. This is the last time actually we have what you call classroom setting on the healthy mind, and we're going over the cell and what inside the body internally, on the cellular level, right? Because ultimately, I like to give you guys the information so you guys understand what's going on, okay? Because once you understand what's going on inside your body, then you have a choice and you could do something about it. Thank you again for all your questions and comments throughout the day. And I know some of you, this is kind of early, especially for the West Coast, around the world, and this is getting travel, which is neat. But I think this is just information I think we can all learn. Some people know more. Some people, so we share and we start to collaborate. I just recently put out a book called The Emotional Reaction Training Manual of the Heart. I'll be putting out on all the other 5 organs, also the stomach, the spleen, the gallbladder, and so on. Is because when we talk about emotional reaction training, we're actually talking about how our body is affected by it, and this is where this is coming from. Because when this all started with the rational mind last week, we understand that things are happening to us and we don't know the effects. I love the way people are trying to stay positive. I like the way people are trying to enact personal enactment, meaning like self-discovery in this time. There's some different news articles and relation out there that's still always pinging on so many different sides. You know, speaking of news, I was thinking that, when we turn to our national news, world news, global news, I heard this before, and maybe someone can correct me, but 90% of the news is only corrected by probably less than 10 corporations around the world. And we have not heard anything about what we're going to do financially. Now, we know we could be slowing down this virus, which is good, which is funny because, the virus is on the cell level. But on slowing down this virus, what are we going to do about economic times? What are we going to do about, I think people work on their spiritual times. And I think people working on their family times. I hope so. But we have not, I think we have not talked about who's being harmed by this. And what I mean is that, there's still people out there who are at home are being abused, or who are people who are not being protected because it's hard for them to be protected when you're so close to the abuser. I've written in my other books before, and things that I've written and things that I have spoken about, that being abused, have been abused, and going through all of that in my life, there is still this type of things that happens inside of you. And if you've been abused, and you have been abused, and you don't know how that's affecting you, because we're in what you call a crisis situation. When I was being abused as a young boy, or even later in my life for different reasons, this is why this type of practice has come up. Hey, Dal, and this is why this practice has come up, and understanding that this works, understanding how this affects your body. Because until you understand how this historical action is affecting your body, and doing with the wise mind, and some of you who have just come on, welcome. If you have any questions, just put it in the comment box, and then I'll get to it. I'll read it. With my bad eyesight, I got different things I'm reading from here to here. So, but when we talk about crisis, and this is what this is, and when it becomes depression or crisis, and we'll get into the cell part, but I'll probably put this up here. We're on the cell level. This is more science for anyone, but this comes back with being signals and communication, right? So when we are talking about how this is affecting our body, we need to understand how our thoughts transmit all the way down, and that's going to be the word transmit, because we are going to talk about transmission, right? And so when we're talking about things transmitting and internal and how it's affecting inside of our bodies, right? And all the information that's coming in, we can control that. I mean, some jobs you have no sense of control, especially if you're a first responder, especially if you're working with families who are struggling. I mean, these are the things you're taking in. People who are touching lives, who are taking all this in, developing this type of practice and understanding helps you release that. It doesn't help it go away. It helps you release it from the internal destruction. Okay? So let's get into, and again, some of this is, I'm not going to repeat some of this, so you can go back to the other videos. You can catch my other videos that I've done all week long and last week on my YouTube channel, or you can catch it on previous live Facebook or live Instagram, okay? But you could definitely, everything is always posted up to my YouTube channel. It's Dr. Paul W. Dyer at Gmail, Dr. Paul Dyer Grandmaster live stream. So let's get right into it. So when we're talking about transmitting, we're talking about, let's start out first with the cell of the body, okay? And then, then we have, we have the cell, right? And so when now that we're coming into the body, right? And when it comes all the way down from the mind into rational, into emotional, bringing it together, the wise mind, these cell levels don't change even from the rational mind or to the emotional mind and the wise. So we talk about transmission. So when we transmit down into the cell level, right? When the cell has a nucleus, then the different cell has what you call I'm a pretty bad speller, so dendrites, right? Dendrites is the receive of messages. Okay? Now, these dendrites pop off of the cell. Now, what these dendrites do, right? They receive signals from other cells. So now we have what you call the axon, and that's the outer part of it. That's where how the message is, how it passes the messages from down into the body. We have to, so understanding this. So once you understand this, and then you have what you have on the well, can you see that? Okay, let me do this. Let me bring that cell down here like that on this side. You have impulse, and then you have neuron transmitters, right? You have neurotransmitters. This is where, when we get into, thank you for asking the question about the neurotransmitters. I was just going to get there. So when the cell attaches, when the cell comes down, you have different transmissions, right? You have the dendrites receive the message from each cell, and the cell has a nucleus, right? I'm not going to get into the really in-depth part of the cell, and I'm just going to keep this pretty simple. This is why when we're talking about what's affecting what. So once we get down into the cell, we have the axon, which is the travel of the cell, and then we have the impulse, and then we have the synapses, right? So synapses, we have the synapses, and that is, it fins off the bottom of the cell. Now this cell is part of what you call a neurotransmitter, right? So I hope you got that. We'll go back to it, because even in, do I have room? Well, even in your neurotransmitter, you almost have like 8 different neurotransmitters that has really effect of our lives. And people talk about, what is neurotransmitters? Well, some people know what a neurotransmitter is, because like serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. So, serotonin, that's a neurotransmitter, and now we know that is the mood, right? And then we have dopamine. These are neurotransmitters. Dopamine is done by pleasure, right? There's the pleasure center. It also does for most people. If it's in the heightened people, dopamine is during the sex time or something excitable, right? So then we have noradrenaline. Non-adrenaline, right? That is something that is for concentration. So, and then we have just regular adrenaline. Adrenaline is that we know is at the fight or flight. And then we have GABA. GABA is more about calming. So then you have glutamate, and then you have other endorphins that come in, and endorphins is a neurotransmitter. So these neurotransmitters, and the reason why I had to come right into here about these neurotransmitters is because these are the things that get affected. Now let's go with being too irrational, right? So I'm going to rewrite this again. Adrenaline. Does anyone else remember? Okay. Let's go with glutamate. Okay, so when we have these neurotransmitters, do your own reading, do your own research, right? Let's go, if you are too emotional, I'm just going to circle around it with the red if you're too emotional and what happens, right? If you're too emotional, the glutamate, right? The glutamate is what is a memory. So we have glutamate's a memory transmitter that gets stopped. Okay? Too emotional. That gets stopped. GABA, calming, that gets stopped. Serotonin and mood. What happens is that decreases. Okay? That decreases. Fight or flight. That adrenaline increases. Right? So now you have concentration, which is now the noradrenaline, right? That concentration, if it doesn't stop, we know it decreases. Dopamine, right? With pleasure, that is completely stopped. Completely. So this is what happens when you're too emotional. And what happens when you're listening to different crises and mood changes, and when we try to work on like our calming, right? And that's what GABA is, GABA transmitters. When we're doing our meditation and our prayers and our joy, this is calming. So this is what, look at all the stuff that decreases, and the only thing that increases is the adrenaline. And the adrenaline, we know, is the fight or flight, right? Fleas, fight or flight. And that's that survival instinct. I talked about that. If you're only interested in talking about your survival, meaning that it's shelter, food, and protection, then you're not working in all parts of this. And this all starts from the original part of the brain, right? And then your mind is about growth and development. The brain is about transmission and receiving. So this is all emotional. So let's go with the rational. So I'll just erase this here. So if you're only in what you call the rational part of your brain, meaning that you don't do enough creativity. It's everything is, good morning, honey, how you doing? This is my wife just popped on. So if you're just going on just the rational mind, like everything has to be a certain way, everything has to have a certain form, otherwise it doesn't make sense to you. I understand that even people with because that's what we're talking about when we talk about neurotransmitters, what fires, and people with ADD, HDD, and all these different things. This is called brain firing, right? Certain things we can trigger the brain to fire so it enacts other parts of the hemisphere of the brain, and that's what's working. So if you're only in rational, right? And then you have glutamate, which we know is memory. That actually gets heightened. But here's the thing about memory and the glutamate, neurotransmitter. If it's memory, it's something you're used to. Remember, this goes back to a historical issue. If it's glutamate, and that's a neurotransmitter, and you're talking about something of a memory, then it's only going to right? Thank you. It's only going to remember something that you are trained in, right? So that's why you have practice, training, and faith. But if you have less training in it and you have less comfortable in it, your glutamate's not going to fire as a neurotransmitter. So that signal's not going to dump into those different parts of the cells that's going to fire all those other parts of the thing. So that's going to go up. Your adrenaline will also go up, right? Because this is a catalyst. A lot of the times adrenaline, my wife had asked this before, does it help? Well, it's a catalyst. It helps push all these other things. If it's already in a vertical going up, then adrenaline pushes it faster, right? It's a little booster. Noradrenaline, right? So what is noradrenaline? Concentration. That also goes up. So what are we concentrating on? We're concentrating on our own memory, our own safety. That's what the concentration comes in from this, noradrenaline. So this neurotransmission is only for concentration, but you're only concentrating on something you're familiar with. So now the dopamine, right? We know dopamine's pleasure. That goes down. Rational minds don't have pleasure. It doesn't attach to the pleasure center of the brain. So the dopamine goes down, or it also stops. Serotonin, mood, also goes down if it doesn't stop. GABA, calming, it actually stops or goes down. So you have down, down, down. So the only thing, when you are just only in rational mind, you only have adrenaline, glutamate, and adrenaline that is going up, memory, right? Fight, flight, or freeze, and concentration. So these three levels, and there's others. There's other parts of neurotransmitters, but I don't want to get into that at all because it's just a little bit too much. Hold on, YouTube. I just asked me a question. The thing, okay, thank you for when we recognize, thank you for asking a question, but when we're only asking our question, the question is how can you control your cellular level? Well, that goes back into the meditation and the practice. When you're talking about the cellular level and understanding what your glutamate is, your adrenaline is, dopamine, serotonin, GABA, and all these neurotransmitters and how they perform inside your body, then you understand that just only being one side of your brain doesn't work. Only being emotional doesn't work. Only being rational doesn't work. That's why the wise mind brings them both in. And in the wise mind, all this is to balance out. Is it difficult? Practice, right? Practice, practice, practice. If you think you're practicing enough, practice some more. If you want to understand how hard to practice, think of yourself as taking yourself into an Olympic level athlete. You think that, this is every moment of your life is the one-time gold medal event. Think of it that way. Every time, every moment in your life, every hug, every kiss, everything that you've done, whether it be perceived as good or bad, is the Olympic moment you've been training for. So if you are working on your wise mind and you incorporate the rational part of your mind and the emotional part of your mind, and you put that together and you balance it out and you practice and you train and you have faith, not belief but faith. Remember, belief is just a wish, right? Faith is trust, complete, open, and honest trust. When you have that, in your practice. Because this is, when it comes down to this level, this is, by the time it signifies what this is doing, it already has you either in a corner or so rational that you're not affected by any emotional, right, any emotional cause, right? You're just like, I just got to stay focused. This is what I just got to do, okay? By the time it hits up there, all these chemicals are already been firing and talking to each other by the different axials and transmitting to each other. So the only way to get these guys to calm and do what you wanted to do is through the practice of calming yourself. Do the practice of faith in yourself. Do the practice of training yourself. And what do I mean by training? There's things that come up in our lives that triggers a thought. Write down the thought. So we know that, I'm going to get rid of these. Triggers a thought, right? And we know we have several thousands, hundred thousands of thoughts in a day. I think it's 700,000 thoughts in a day. But anyway, it triggers a thought. Once it triggers the thought, doesn't matter what the thought is. I go with understand historical delivery. Understand the historical delivery of the thought. If you see something, what does it recognize you? Historical of the thought. What is it triggering? Historical of the thought. What is it bringing into your life? Historical of the thought. Because if to practice on the now, and that's the only way you're going to get on the cellular level for it to be balanced. To practice on the now, you have to understand the historical delivery of the thought. If you don't, then what you're going to just be doing is reaction. If you don't understand the historical of the thought, the only thing you're going to do is reaction. Reaction on memory, what you're used to, what you experience, what your environment had told you what you needed to do, and what your life says you're supposed to be. So all these are constructs that have been developed for you. That you're a woman, you're black, you're this, you're dumb, all these things you're fighting against from the thought. But if you understand historical delivery of the thought and where it has come from, then you actually have an opportunity to change, to go from one side to the other. Am I too emotional? Am I too irrational? And do I bring it both in to the wise mind? I'm not going to take up too much of your time. Thank you guys for joining me. I know you can please share this with your friends. If you have any questions, contact me throughout the day. Let's see if I have I didn't check all my questions. Faith in what? Or what? Okay, so my wife had asked this, is faith in what? So when you have faith, that means something higher than yourself. I'm not, and for those of the people who are in Passover, welcome to have a happy Passover. Passover actually means changing and endowing yourself to complete love. So I hope you have a great Passover. So faith in something higher than yourself, that is faith. Complete honesty, open, higher than yourself. Take yourself out of the equation because life is more than you. That's why your higher consciousness is service. And I'm going a little bit over time, but this is important. So life is about service. The highest of consciousness is service, because that means you're actually engaging in the act of doing for others outside yourself. The lowest part of consciousness is all survival. It's only doing for yourself so you live. So you live. So you get the reward. So it's you. In the middle of that pyramid, and I did that pyramid before. In the middle of the pyramid is transformation. Right? In the middle of the pyramid, the highest part is consciousness, right? Service. The lowest part of consciousness is survival, and the middle is transformation. So you can develop transformation. We are going through transformation, but that has to do with growth and development, and that takes the mind. If you're only going to go back into the brain, then the brain is only going to keep you down here on the lower level consciousness, and that's survival. We can do better. So thank you again. I don't want to again take up. Make sure you get your meditation, your exercises in, and stay safe. Keep your prayers in, and I know as long as you understand what your mind is doing, you don't have to fall so into the trap or to the rabbit hole of this is doomsday, because we're going to be going through some more things. We're going to go through some financial troubles. We're going to go through some emotional troubles. We're going to go through, and I think we're grieving, and I know we're grieving, and this is part of this grieving process. Is understanding. Allow this to be the new normal when you're grieving. Allow this to be what you can be, what we need to be when we come out of this. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so tough on yourself, but allow yourselves to grieve. I'm Dr. Paul. Always catch me. Email me, drpaul@holisticscience.com. I wish you all